Alright guys, welcome back to another MCreator procedure tutorial. So today what we're going to be looking at is tags, how they basically work, how to set them up, and some resources where you can actually find them. So let's go ahead and start with locating them, and then I will go over basically what the actual strings and all the components and stuff are for. So let's get started. So the first block that we have up here is a block one, and that can be found under block procedures and then data. And then if you scroll down a little bit, there is one right here called get tag for the block, and you can test for the block namespace as well as the registry for that block. So that's the, well, this one right here. There's another one at the top there, which is get random block from tag. This one will basically just cycle a random block from the tag. It's kind of like a loot table, but not exactly. Loot tables have a little bit more properties. Tags, it's just getting a random one from the particular one. But those are the two block ones. And then there are two item ones as well. There's this one and this one here. If you go under the item procedures, data, and then you'll have the tag one right at the top here. And then there is also somewhere in here a random tag one. Should be somewhere around here, right here. So this would be the item tag one. By default, it is dirt. I'm not sure. Oh, this is a registry. That's why I got them mixed up. So this would be the proper one. And you would have the registry for the logs here. And then that's these two covered. So this one and this one here. And then we also have one for projectiles. So if we go under the projectile damage types, or pardon me, damage type, and then there's one for is fire. So you can set your own damage types based on tags and stuff. There's also one for entities. So you can test for entities. That's under entity data. And it's right near the top here. You can set the namespace and tag for that one. It also has a selector. All these have different selectors for the type of item or block as well, so it's really easy. And then the last one that is currently in the actual program is one for biomes. So if we go under the world tab, data, and then scroll down a little bit, there's one here for biomes. Now, most biomes in a particular world have a tag is overworld or is nether, or a few other ones that are specifically for grouping all the biomes for that particular dimension into that particular main group. So technically you can test for the world using biomes as long as you have a tag like this. So as long as you group them all into one tag, you can generally test for a dimension if it has all those particular biomes. And you have, if you add biomes to your to the one of the basic dimensions like the overworld, nether, or end, then you generally want to categorize them and add them to this particular tag so other mods can test for it. So then that kind of brings us to the next part, and that is basically what these values do return. So mainly these ones here. So those are all logic statements, and they will return true or false based on if the condition is true or false. These ones are random, so they'll return either an item stack or a block state. And the other thing that we need to look at is how to actually format these. So that means we need to actually know how tags work. So let's get over to tags and take a look at that. All right, so with that part out of the way, let's go ahead and go to our main workspace, and then there is one called element tags right on the side here, and generally you'll have this completely blank. Now I had a tag already added that was a block state one, so you might need to use tags when you're using groups of blocks. This is way easier than testing for each item, especially if it has multiple block states and stuff like that. So it's easier to generally test for a series of items in a tag and then base it on the block states and everything than if you were to try to group random tags and stuff like that, or single items and stuff, or any particular thing. Rather than testing for this entity, this entity, this entity, you can just say any entity in this list, and then it makes it easier to basically test for that particular thing. So to create a tag, you just go up here onto the part here and you go create new tag, and then it gives you a whole bunch of different options. So we know that we have item tags, we know that we have block tags, we have entity tags. Functions do technically have tags, but I'm not sure if there is a tag function for that. Biomes, yes, and damage types. Those are your main tags that you will be using with these particular blocks. I think there's also enchantments, but those I don't think we have a tag selector for. I think it's a little bit different when you're actually testing for those. And there's also game events. Now, Minecraft is generally data driving everything that is in the game. So it's very possible that we'll be getting more of these tags as time goes on. But the logic behind them are very similar. And that's kind of what we're going to be looking at with this particular tab. So once you have one selected, you can click on the drop down box and there will be a few different tags here to choose from. So for example, Minecraft is the ones that are from the Minecraft namespace. C is commonly used for Fabric. We have, I believe NeoForge uses it nowadays, and many other APIs use this particular tag, and it sometimes includes the Minecraft namespace tags as well. Generally, if you can find a tag under C, which I will provide a link where you can actually search that up, then you want to probably use that particular one. Though I always like to also include the relative blocks and stuff that are in that tag, just to make sure that it's compatible long term as well. And then we have your mod one. So this one you can just leave literally set to mod, and that will allow you to basically just make your own mod namespace. Now you could technically type it out like whatever you want, and that would also work for your namespace. But if you change your namespace and you update your mod or whatever namespace, then that won't update, and you have to update all your namespaces and stuff. It's not ideal. So what I would suggest doing is actually just selecting mod and then using this particular tag here as is to basically use for your tag. So the other thing down here, we have the name of the tag. So by default, this is tag. So it would be like, for example, we're in latest. That's the name space of our the test workspace. So it'd be latest, and then in this case tag for the actual registry part for it. So we could give it something like or blocks, and we could have it under our own namespace. Now, one thing to drive home is the Minecraft and C tags. Those are for compatibility between other mods, where if you're using your mod namespace, this is basically for your own mechanics and stuff like that. When you want to link things up to the game and to other mods, then you want to use one of these two tags. Now, if you're on an old version that supports tags, then you might use these two still, which are very similar to the C tag, but they have their own tag conventions. I'm not completely familiar where to find those particular ones, but I do know where the C tags are and where the Minecraft tags are, so I'll be able to provide those two. All right, so let's go ahead and just create a tag here. So we have it under our mod namespace. We have or blocks, and then what we could do is we could select the tag element and add a bunch of or blocks to this particular tag here. So we can go ahead with something like redstone. We'll go all the way to copper here, I think. And we'll go ahead and use these ones. So those are the blocks that we're going to be using on this tag. For items, very similar. You just select what items and all that particular. So when we go back to our test procedure, I'm going to clean this up. So we're going to use the get block, and we're going to basically test if it is a block when we right click on that block. So let's go ahead and set that up. I'm going to remove all these blocks that we are not using. So we'll get rid of all of these, and I wish there was an easier way to remove the conditions. Oh, there is actually on this particular version. So we can create a if statement, just set this up. And I believe there is one here called remove unused. So you can actually clear out certain blocks. So that was added recently, really handy tool. All right, so we might come into a problem now because we have our mod namespace and we also have OR blocks. Now we know the registry, but if we change our mod namespace, well, that's going to be a problem because we need to actually specify the namespace in this part. We can't use mod for that. The game will treat it as mod being the actual namespace, not latest, which is what our mod is actually currently for that namespace. So what we would need to do is, I would suggest, if you're working with tags with your own namespace, to go to variables. I already have a variable here for, I believe, the last tutorial. What you would do is you would create a string tag, and you would just call it mod namespace. And I would set this to session, because then if you have to update your mod namespace or whatever, it's going to change. It will be assigned every session. So this will be really useful for if you update your mod namespace or anything like that. And then you just basically go ahead and type your namespace in here like you would for your tag. Now, if we go to the elements, workspace settings, we can see this is the namespace that we have for our mod here. So I'm just going to make sure that this is completely accurate, just paste it in. And then we can use this particular variable to actually assign it to our text here. So we just go create with, and we're going to use that for our OR blocks. I think that's how I spelt it. Go back to the tags. OR blocks. Yep, that's good. And then we're going to use our registry, but we need to restart the actual thing because it currently doesn't have a the updated variable, so we need to restart the application. And then we can see that it's already set up because we have it set up, so that's great. So we're going to go ahead and use the target block state, and then all we need to do is make a right-click event. Right click on block to get the block location. And then finally, for our test, what we can do is we can print out to the player. Why not the name of the block? I think we can do that. So we can go to well, we can print out the registry, I guess, too, if we really wanted to. We could try to convert it to our item stack. That's a little bit confusing, so I'm just going to go ahead and print out the registry, I think, of it. And that will allow us to see that it will work. We could show it on the action bar, but that is time-based, so this should be fine for what we need. So we'll save that, and then we'll go into game and give it a quick test. All right, so the easiest way in game to actually test if the block is actually under namespace, and this is on 26.1.2 for Minecraft. So you would press F3 and then F6 while holding down F3. This will pop open the tab here. And if we scroll down a little bit, we can actually go to one looking at block tags, set this to overlay, and then we can see all the block tags that each block has. So as you can see, they're all a little bit different. So what we would look for is our namespace. So if we look at like Emerald, we can see there's one called latest, and then or blocks, and then that's our tag there. I believe we set redstone, so we can see that there's latest there. Lapis should have it. Yep. And diamond, yes. Gold, yep. And coal, no, actually we don't have one for coal there. It doesn't look like we do. And then iron, we don't have one for iron. So if we right click on this particular block, and we won't have anything that happens there. If we click on gold, nothing. And I'm almost wondering if the trigger didn't set up properly. Let me double check the script there to make sure that everything's set up. All right, so I see the issue that we basically have. So there needs to be a colon between the namespace and the OR block. So basically right now we're just technically using a full namespace with our latest and then OR blocks. So that's not going to work. We need a colon to tell the game that there is a basic value between the two. So it should look like this. We have our namespace, colon, and then our tag path. Now tags can also have technically paths too. You would use a slash and then a path name. We'll get into that in just a second. But for example, we would have like ors, and then that would basically be the folder that it's stored in, and then OR blocks would be the tag. So we don't actually have one set up here for that. So what we could do is when you're setting one up, you would do ors slash OR blocks like this, and then make sure that it's under whatever namespace that you want. So in this case, we do something like that. And then you would have the ors slash OR blocks, and then that would fall into that tag. So just a fun fact, it's easy to organize things that way, because then you could have like subgroups and stuff like that. Sometimes C tags actually use that same process. So yeah, so that should actually fix the problem. Let's go ahead and just make sure that everything is set up here. Good to go. We'll start up the game and then give it a quick test again. All right, so I made sure the tag was actually pointing to the right thing where we had all our blocks. So if we right click on each block here, we can see that it will print out the tag names for each block. And we get to these two, and these two don't actually, they're not in that tag. So when I'm right clicking on them, they're not actually doing anything. So it's just these blocks that are in the tag that are actually running. So that's a really easy way to test for multiple blocks or multiple items or multiple entities into one particular group. So very handy thing to actually do. Now, I just want to demonstrate that whole C tag thing. I do have it actually bookmarked on my thing because I do help people from time to time with tags specifically. So if we go into C tags, there's this link right here. It is wiki.fabricmc.net/community common_tags. I think it might have a colon there. I'm not entirely sure. I'll provide the link in the description. And as you can see, there is quite a bit of tags here that you'll be able to find. You might even need some sort of search engine that will be able to sort through all that stuff. I believe Chrome has a filter search thing. I can't remember exactly where it is. Somewhere in here. I don't use it that often, but most likely, yeah, find and edit. So you can find and edit, and then, I don't know, we could search for coal, and it will highlight parts of the page where there's coal and stuff like that. So there is apparently 4 different or 40 different entries in this page for coal, so we can cycle between them and see if there's any particular tag that we might need coal for. So it's a really handy tool, especially if you have Chrome or whatever. I'm not sure about other engines, like search engines, but there are quite a bit of tags in this page. It goes on. It has everything from items to blocks and a lot of other things. So they give you a little index at the top here, so you can kind of search for the sections, but then you have to go through every individual tag. So it's not an ideal website for finding, but if you have a website for, or a search engine that can actually search for things, then definitely use that instead to help locate that. Now, Minecraft has their own tags. That's under this page here, and they actually have a few different tags at the bottom here. We have one for blocks, items, functions, fluid, entity types. Those are basically the entity tags. Game events, biomes, so we need that kind, and data types. There's a whole list of them here that are actually relevant. We'll go and click on blocks because that's commonly used for most people. And this one's a little bit structured better than the common tags because you can just scroll along here and see if there's something in that list that you are looking for without scrolling down the whole entire page. So that's really handy, especially if you have a general idea of what you're looking for. Again, you can still search for certain things because most of this is going to be able to be tagged. Most of these are open and stuff, so you can like search for copper and that should come up. The only thing that I don't like about this website is it doesn't state when the version was particularly added. For that, you have to scroll all the way down to the bottom of the page, and I mean quite literally to the bottom, and then there is a history section, but if you don't know when it was added, it makes it really difficult to find when that particular thing was added. So it makes it hard to actually know when a tag has been removed or added and what version it was for and all that stuff. But they do provide all that information here. It's just a little bit hard to actually find it when you don't know what you're looking for. And like with blocks, there are so many blocks here and so many history events. And there's also upcoming, which is going to be fun, some changes with that one. But other than that, I'll provide this link as well, and hopefully you guys will be able to make use of that. Again, these two tag sites are basically for mod compatibility. So you would use these for making compatibility between your mods or other mods that you don't own. So, and even the game in that case, like some of these tags for Minecraft, like for example, let's see if I can go to the top and find one. So there is a few tags in here that are like crops. So these have mechanics and stuff built into them. I can't remember exactly what this one, bee growables. So this one basically allows bees to pollinate the plants and help them grow up to another stage. So that's actually a really handy tag to actually have when you're working with custom crops and stuff. And yeah, just things like that will actually help with making mechanics and stuff work with the base game. So hopefully that makes sense. If you're new to my channel, don't forget to subscribe, comment down below, rate the video, and I will see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching. Peace out.